Hey Chevra, what's going on? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Pei Gimel, Daf 83 of Masechta Ayruvin. Chevra, we're doing some math today. So, go chop a calculator. If you have a smartphone, that'll be fine. And let's get calculating. We're going to start on Daf Pei Beis Amud Beis all the way at the bottom of the Daf. Chetzi levayis hamenuga v'chatzi chetzi livsos hagvia. So we said that the shiur, the measurement for an Eruv Tumen is mazon shtei sudis, enough for 2 meals. And we said half of that, so 1 meal, i.e. a pras, is the shiur for bayis hamenuga. If somebody walks into a house that has tsaras, so if he waits in there enough to eat 1 pras, which would be half of a it's machlokes in Reb Shimon and Reb Yochanan and Broka, but if he eats 1 pras, 1 meal's worth, well, if he waits in the house long enough that he could eat 1 meal's worth of wheat bread, so then his clothing becomes tamei. And then we said half of that is then if a person eats tamei food, then he won't be able to eat truma right after that. I guess he'll probably have to go to the mikvah or something. Now, it says the Gemara on the top of Pei Gimel Amud Aleph, Tana, we learn in Brisa of a chatzi chetzia, and half of a half of a half or whatever. So basically a quarter of the mazon shtei, a quarter of 1 meal, or an eighth of mazon shtei sudis, right? Meaning if you take the mazon shtei sudis, if you take the 2 meals, you divide it in half, so it's 1 meal. So that is the shiur for the bayis hamenuga, for the clothing to become tamei. And then if you take half of that, i.e. half of a meal, so then that would be the shiur that if you eat it, if you eat tamei food, then you won't be able to eat truma. Then half of that, so a quarter of a meal, will be the tamei tumas ochlin, so it can transmit, right? If it is tamei, well then it can transmit, if it's food and it's tamei, it could transmit tumas ochlin to other things that are susceptible to tumas ochlin. Very beautiful. The Tana didan by tamei lo tani tumas ochlin. How come the Tana of our Mishnah stopped after? How come the Tana in our Mishnah stopped after lifsos agvia? How come the Tana of our Mishnah stopped after half of a meal, which is that if you eat that, then you cannot eat truma afterwards? How come it didn't continue and also mention this additional half, which is tumas ochlin? So mishum de lo shavu shi'urayu la'adade, it's because it's not an exact measure. It's not, everything until now has been half of the thing before, whereas when it comes to the additional half, i.e. like the quarter of a meal, which is the share of the tamei tumas ochlin, so then it's not exactly half of the thing before it. The Tanya, as we learn in a Brisa, kamashir chatzi pras. So how much is half of a pras, i.e. the amount that if you eat it, you won't be able to eat truma afterwards. So beis beitzim chaser kima. It's 2 eggs worth minus a little bit. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi Omer says Rabbi Yossi, beis beitzim shochakos. Rabbi Yossi says it's 2 eggs plus a little bit. Shi'er Rebbe, beis beitzim ve'od. Whereas Rebbe said it's 2 eggs and a little bit more. Kamen v'od. How much is this little bit more? Echad me'esrim bebeitza, 1/20th of an egg. Okay, fine. Great. So that's what half of a process, right? So again, we had mazon shtei sudis, i.e. 2 process, and that was for Eruv Tumen. We had half of that, which is for bayis hamenuga. Half of that is lifsos agvia. And now we get to this final thing about tumas ochlin, and we're saying it's not exactly going to be half of the previous thing. Bilugabi tumas ochlin, Tanya, we learn in a brisa by tumas ochlin, Rabbi Nosson, Rabbi Dosa amru, kibeitza sha'amru, kamoa v'chiklipaso. That Rabbi Nosson and Rabbi Dosa say that when we're talking about the kibeitza to be matami tumas ochlin, so it is a egg with its shell. The Chacham below klipa, whereas the Chacham say it's the shell without the egg. And the thing is that isn't like it's not half of any of the shi'urs, right? So for example, Rabbi Yehuda said that the 2 eggs to be lifsol sakvia, so it's a little bit less than 2 eggs. Now, if we say that the Tami Tumas Ochlin is an egg with its shell, well, clearly that's not half of the previous one, and we're assuming that even if we say that it's a little bit less than half of the, even if it's without the shell, then it's not exactly going to be 50% of Rabbi Yehuda either, right? So meaning, so this one egg, right, whether it's with the shell or without the shell, it's not exactly going to be 50% of the shiur of lifsol sagvia. Rafin by Papa says Rafin by Papa Amr of Chizda Zodive Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yossi. So says Rafin by Papa in the name of Chizda that those shiurim, right, whether it's like Rabbi Yehuda who says that lifsol sagvia is a little bit less than 2 eggs, whether it's Rabbi Yossi who says it's a little bit more than 2 eggs, that's their opinion. But Chachamim say the Chacham kibeitza v'mechza shochakos, that the shiur lifsol sagvia, that if you eat that amount you can't eat truma, is actually 1.5 eggs, and that's because a kav is made up of 24 eggs. Now, we had said that according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, that in half of a kav, there are really 4 meals, right? So half of a kav is 12 eggs. So we said that there's really 4 meals in half of a kav, but really you only buy from the store owner 2 meals, right? No, I'm sorry. What did I say? I said 4 meals. No, it's really 6 meals no, it's 6 eggs in half of a kav. Sorry, I messed that up. 1 kav is 24 eggs, which means that oh gosh, I really screwed that up. 1 kav is 24 eggs, which means that half of a kav is 12 eggs. Now, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka had said that mazon shtei sudas is really a quarter of a kav, because the store owner has a markup of 50%. So therefore, mazon shtei sudas is really 6 eggs, right? A quarter of a kav. And therefore, if 2 sudas is 6 eggs, well then, that means that 1 suda, i.e. a pras, is 3 eggs, which means that lifsol sagvia is going to be half of that, which is 1.5 eggs. So therefore, the chacham is Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. So pshita, that's obvious. So shochakos as la'ashmo inon. What the chacham are coming to teach us is that when we say 1.5 eggs, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, it's not just 1.5 regular eggs, it's 1.5 egg, like big eggs. Okay. Kasser Rav Dimi, when Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, Omar, he said, Shiger Bonyos liRebbi, that Bonyos sent to Rebbe, Mudya de Kundis, that's just a fancy way of saying Asa'ah, to Min Nausa, from this place of Nausa, Vishir Rebbe, Mosan Vishvayas Rebein. And Rebbe said that this Sa'ah is 217 eggs worth. Now, here's the thing. A Sa'ah is really 144 eggs worth, right? Because a Sa'ah is 6 kavs. Now, if 1 kav is 24 eggs, well then 24 times 6 is 144. So really, a Sa'ah should be 144 eggs. Now, interestingly, Rebbe said that a Sa'ah is 217 eggs. So now we're going to try to figure out what's this 217 thing. Ha-Sa'ah dehecha. What kind of Sa'ah are we talking about that would be 217 eggs? Idim et barios kuf memdalet havya. Well, if we're talking about eggs from the desert, right, desert-sized eggs, well, that's just regular eggs, there would be 144 of them. The Yerushalmis, and if we're talking about the Jerusalem eggs, which are 20%, a quantity of 20% larger than the Midbar eggs, well, then Kuf Ayin Gimel Havya. Well, if you add 20% to 144, it is 173. V'id tziporios, and if we're talking about the tzipori eggs, which are 20% larger than the Jerusalem eggs, reish zayin havyon. Well, 20% more than 173 is 207. So how do you get to 217? So the olam de tziporios. So really, we're talking about the tzipori eggs. Aisi chalsa shdi alayu. But what you do is, in addition to the 207 eggs of the Sa'ah, you also add challah. challah is 1/24th, as we learned yesterday, and challah kam mehavyon tamne, and the challah, so 1/24th of 207 would be another 8, so we would get to 215. But akati batzule, but it's still short because we need 217, not 215. So ella isi ve'odos derebi shtialayu. No, so rather scratch the whole challah thing. Rather, you start with 207, which are the tzipori eggs. But then Rebbe had said earlier that these eggs are really an egg and 1/20th. So you have to add an additional 1/20th to the tzipori eggs. So you start with 207, then you add, so basically every 20 eggs is going to be 1 egg. So that means for every 100 eggs there's an additional 5. So for 200 eggs there's an additional 10. So that's how you get up to 217. And those additional 7/20ths of an egg are just a fraction and they don't count. So that's how you get to 217. But if so, but still, it's a little more than 217, right? Meaning, right, because we had said, right, what about those 7/20ths of an egg? Since 7/20ths of an egg is not, it's not even a full egg, so we don't count it, and therefore that's how we get to 217 eggs according to Rabbi. Tana Rabbanan, the Rabbi's taught in the Braisa. Saw Yerushalmis Yisera Amid Baris Shtus. So a Jerusalem saw is larger than a midbar saw by a shtus, which is a sixth, but really it's really a fifth. It's really 20%, right? The way that we calculate like Talmudic fractions is that it's the or Mishnaic fractions is that it's based on the total. So meaning if you take 100 and then you add a fifth of 100 to it, so if you add 20 to 100, so then it's 120. So then in retrospect, the 20 that you added are 1/6 of the total, because 1/6 of 120 is 20. So basically, the Jerusalem Sa'ah is 20% larger than the desert Sa'ah, Shtus. V'shal Tziporis Yisera al Yerushalmis Shtus, and the Tzipori Sa'ah is larger than the Jerusalem Sa'ah by 20% as well. Nimtzeis shal Tziporis Yisera al Midbaris Shlish, and therefore the Tzipori Sa'ah, which is 207 eggs, is larger than the desert Sa'ah, which is 144 eggs by 1/3. Now, anybody who's doing their calculating will realize that that's not correct, because the difference between 207 and 144 is 63, whereas 1/3, I mean, we're going to try to figure out a third of what, but a third of any of these measurements is not going to be 63. So, shlish deman, what third are we talking about? Yilem shlish de midbaris, if we're talking about a third of the midbar sa'ah, which is 144 eggs, mirde shlish de midbaris kamahave, well, what's 1/3 of 144? Arbain vitmanya, 48. Vilu odfa shisin vitlas, but the a third of 207 is 63. So 48 is not 63. Ve'ela shlish de Yerushalmis. Okay, so maybe we're talking about a third of the Jerusalem Sa'ah, which is 173 eggs. But shlish dida kamahave chamshin v'tmanin nechitilsa comes out to 157 and 2/3. No, not 157, 57 and 2/3. 57 and 2/3 is not 63. Ve'ilu od fashisin v'tlas, right? So we need 63, not 57 and 2/3. Ve'ela de tzipori. So what about the tzipori sa'ah, which is 207 eggs? Well, shlish dida kamahave shivin nechichada. Well, 1/3 of 207 is 69, which ve'ilu od fasamach gimel. But the difference between 207 and 144 is 63, not 69. So Elo Rabbi Yirmiyah rather says Rabbi Yirmiyah hachi kamar. This is what it means that the difference between the tzipori sa'ah and the midbari sa'ah is a third. So it means nimtzeis sa'ah shel tzipori yisera al midbaris, that the sa'ah of tzipori, which is 207 eggs, is larger than the desert sa'ah, which is 144 eggs, and the difference would be 63 eggs, is karuv l'shlish shela, is near a third of it. So meaning a third of 207 is 69, and the difference between 207 and 144 is 63. So it's close to that. Okay. B'shlish shela karov lemechza de midbaris. And additionally, a third of a tzipori sa'a, which is 207, a third of that is 69, is close to half of the midbaris sa'a, i.e. 144 divided by 2 is 72, 69 is pretty close to 72. Very beautiful. Maskefla Ravina Asakasha, Midi Karov Katani. Ravina says, does it say anywhere in that brisa about being close to a third of something? No. So Ella Amar Ravina, rather says Ravina Hachi Kamer, Nim says Shlish Sel Tzipori, Biva'odis Shel Rebbe, that if you take a third of the Tzipori eggs, including the additional 1/20th that Rebbe was talking about, i.e. 217, and you take a third of that, so it comes out to 72 and a third. So Yisera al Mechza Shal Midbaris, so is larger than half of the Midbaris, is, i.e. half the Midbaris is 144 divided by 2 is 72. So a third of 217, which is 72 and a third, is larger than 72 shlish beitza by 1/3 of an egg. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught Reisha Sariso Sechem that you have to take challah, right? Reisha Sariso Sechem from your dough. So Kedei Iso Sechem, so from your dough. V'chama Iso Sechem, how much is your dough? Kedei Isas Hamidbar, it is like the dough of the midbar. V'chama Isas Hamidbar, what is the dough? How much is the dough of the midbar? Well, Dichsev, as it says, Va'omer, that the Omer was Asira Sa'efahu. It's 1/10 of an ephah. So an ephah is 3 sa'a. Now, if a sa'a is 144 eggs, so 144 times 3 is 432. So 1/10 of that is 43.2. So Mikan Amru, from here they said Zayin Rivaim Kemach Ve'od Chayev Bechala. That's how they said that 7 Rivaim of Kemach and a little bit more is Chayev and Chala. A Reva is a log because there are 4 logs in a kav. So a Reva is a log. So and a log is 6 eggs. So 7 times 6 is 42. So we said 42 in ve'od, and a fraction. So i.e. 42 and another 1.2 is chayeves and chala, i.e. 43.2, which is 1/10 of a sa'a. Okay. What 1/10 of an ephah. Fine. Shehein Vav Shel Yerushalmis, which of course is the so 7 rivaim of kemach is the equivalent of 6 of the Yerushalmis, because it's a larger amount. Shehein Hey Shel Tzipori, which is the equivalent of 5 of Tzipori, which is even larger. So meaning each Jerusalem log is larger than the midbar logs, and each Tzipori log is larger than the Yerushalmi log. That's why you need less of them. Mikan Amru, from here they said, Ochal Kamidas Zo Harezo Bari Umavarach. Somebody who eats this amount, these 43.2 eggs worth, well then you're going to be very healthy and blessed. Yasser Alkein, more than this Raivtan, you're a gla in Pachas Mikan, less than this Mukukul B'meyav, means you have weak intestines. Alright, Chaver, new Mishnah. Anshe Chatzor v'Anshe Mirpeses Sheshachachu v'lo Ervu. Chaver, remember the Chatzor and the Mirpeses? Right, that's a Chatzor, a courtyard. And in the courtyard there's like a 2-story building, right? So you have the ground floor with the bottom level of the people that open up, that their entrance to their house goes right into the Chatzor. But then you like climb up to the second floor, to the second landing, and then there's like another, Chatzor, like Mirpeset, kind of in front of another 2 doors that go into another 2 apartments. So, right, and then they kind of have to walk out through the main chutzner to get out to Rosh Hashanah. So you walk into this chutzner, you can go directly into some apartments, or you can climb up to a second story, and there's like another landing there, and then there's 2 apartments that open up to that higher landing. So, Sheshachachu v'lo eruv, and they didn't make an eruv together. They made their own separate eruvs, but not together. So kol shegavoa yud tfachim l'mirpeses. So anything that is 10 tfachim tall is shaykh to the mirpeses, right? So if you have like a pile of something, for example, in the chutzner, and it's 10 tfachim tall, so then it becomes the rights of the second floor people, and they can use that pile. Pachos mikan, if it's less than 10 tfachim, the chutzner, well then it's the rishus of the chutzner, not the mirpeses. Chulia sabor ve'asela, if you have a pit that you dug out and there's all the sand surrounding the pit that raises its height, ve'asela, and or if you have a rock, shein gvoim asar tfachim, that they are 10 tfachim tall, well, limerpeset, well then they are considered part of the rishus of the balcony. Pachas mikan, if the pile is less than 10 tfachim, no, not the pile, if the rock or the pit that they dug out is less than 10 tfachim, so the chatzer, then it's the property of the chatzer. When do we say this? Besmucha. That's only if these items are close to the second story. Aval b'mufleges, if we're talking about, let's say, a pile that's far away from the second story that they're certainly not going to be able to use, well then afilu gavoa yud tfachim l'chatzer, even if it's 10 tfachim tall, it's obviously going to be part of the rishus of the chatzer and not the merpesek because it's too far away from them. Ve'ezu ismucha, what's considered close? Kol she'enu rechoka arba'ya tfachim, as long as it's within 4 tfachim of the merpeset, so then if it's higher than 10 tfachim, it will belong to them. Says the Gemara, Pshita, it's obvious that lo zeh Pesach v'lo zeh Pesach, that when you have 2 chatzers, okay, and there's some item in between the 2 chatzers, and it's convenient for both of them to use it, right? Let's say there's some kind of wall that is between the 2 chatzers, and it's convenient for both of the chatzers to be able to use it. It's, let's say, I don't know, a few tfachim tall, right? So if it's convenient for both of them to use it, so hainu chalon sheben shtei chatzeros. Well, then that's the case of when you have a window that's between 2 chatzers, that it doesn't necessarily belong to either one of the chatzers, and therefore neither one can use it. Lazeh bezrika v'lazeh bezrika. If it's inconvenient for both of them to use it, for example, if you have a wall that's 10 tfachim tall and it's 4 tfachim wide, so we had said hainu kosel sheben beis chatzeros. Well, then that's the situation of a wall that's between 2 chatzeros, that we said if there are fruits on top of it, they can eat the fruits on top of it, but they can't take it into either chatzar because neither chatzar has rights to it. Lazeh b'shilshul v'lazeh b'shilshul. If both chatzars have to lean down and it's inconvenient for both of them to get it, such as if there's a ditch between the 2 chatzars, well, hainu charetz shebein beis chatzeres. Well, then that's the situation of the ditch that's between 2 chatzars, and we say that it divides the 2 chatzars in half, and they're unable to make an eruv together, and they're also unable to access this ditch because it doesn't belong to either one of them. Lazeh b'pesach v'lazeh b'zrika, and a situation where it's convenient for one of them to use it, but it's going to be too tall for the other one. It's going to be hard for the other one to use it. For example, right? So hainu de Rabbi bar Rav Huna Rav Nachman. That's the situation of Rabbi bar Rav Huna and Rav Nachman. Remember when we had 2 chatzars on different stories, right? So you had a lower chatzar and an upper chatzar, right? There was a wall between them. But now, so it was so for the lower chatzar, it's inconvenient to use the wall. For the upper chatzar, it's convenient to use the wall. So we said that it belongs to the upper chatzar. The upper chatzar can use the top of the wall, not the lower one. Lazeh b'pesach v'lazeh b'shilshul. Now we're talking about, right, so a situation where it's convenient for one person to use it, but the other one's going to have to bend down to use it. Hanu de Rav Shezvi Amar Rav Nachman. That's the situation of Rav Shezvi Amar Rav Nachman, right? When you had the ditch, that for one chatzar it's low down and it's convenient for them to use the ditch, but for the other chatzar they're high up and they would really have to bend down to use the ditch. So we say that it belongs to the lower chatzar in that case. If you have a situation where one of them would have to bend down to use it and the other one would have to reach up to use it, then what's the halacha? So for example, let's say you have a chatzar, right? Almost like our 2 stories, right? Almost like the situation, right? You can imagine the situation in our Mishnah where you have this chatzar and then you have a second story. So we had said that if the pile is 10 tfachim tall, so then it's the property, right? It's part of the rishus of the upper balcony. But what if the upper balcony is 20 tfachim tall? So it's 10 tfachim above the ground, so it would be considered inconvenient due to its height. It would be inconvenient for the lower chatzar, but since the upper chatzar is 20 tfachim above it, so they would have to bend down in order to use it, so it's inconvenient for both of them. So Amar Rav Shnei Asurin. So Rav says, well then both of them are unable to use it if it's inconvenient for both of them. Ushmuel Amar Nosnin also Lezesha B'Shilshul. So Shmuel says no, you can give it to the upper chatzar. We can consider it to be their rishus, Why? Because it's considered that relative to having to reach up for something, it's easier to bend down for something. So therefore we can consider it as though it's convenient for the upper chatzar to use this pile, or this thing that's within 10 tefachim. Well, not within 10 tefachim, that's more than 10 tefachim, but it's more than 10 tefachim from the ground and more than 10 tefachim from the upper chatzar. Also, we can consider it to be the rishus of the upper chatzar, because they can bend down to use it, and that would be considered convenient enough. And whenever you have a situation where it's convenient for one rishus to use, for one chatzar to use it, and inconvenient for the other one, we give it to the one who it's easy for them to use it. Well, Chevra, that was Daf Pei Gimel. Lots of math. I mean, not much more I could say than that. Peace out.